Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee. How is everybody doing tonight? Hey there, 1776. Hey Tyler, how are things going? Gas is anywhere between 4.29 and about 3.88 is what the going rate is. I think it's 3.88 here where we are, but a couple of surrounding communities around here are more. Just wanted to throw that out there. Hey there, sweet Irene. Glad to have you here. Um, Wanted to talk a little bit about the ever popular prepping community discussion. You always see this in prepping videos, and you got a broad spectrum of people that discuss this kind of stuff. And I look at a prepping community basically like who do you need to basically function on a day-to-day basis? That's how I look at a prepping community. So, you should have a shade tree mechanic that you know. You should have a plumber or an HVAC guy that you know. Anybody that's in the medical industry, anywhere from a CNA up to an RN, up to a doctor, it's good to know those kind of folks. A veterinarian isn't bad to know either because, they overlap with stuff. And you get a lot of the people that talk about it. It always goes back to kind of the ex-military things. And when you look at the broad spectrum of the military has all kinds of people that make things and fix things and all this other stuff, and that stuff you don't talk about. They don't talk about as much. It's always about kind of the infantry stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that has to take place so the infantry can do their job, right? So that's kind of how that goes. Hey there, Candace, how you doing? Yeah, it's like 3.88 here, and a couple other towns. It was a size 4.29. What I seen. Hey there, dog. How you doing? Living the call. How you doing? 379 in Bridgeport. For those of you not in Michigan, Bridgeport is along I-75, and it's sort of between Saginaw and Flint. So it's sort of in that area there where you're starting to get down into the urban areas of Michigan, the more urban areas of Michigan, just so folks know where that is. Hey there, Gallo. 319 in eastern Iowa. Boy, that's cheap. even for us. Hey, Captain Bart. Hey there, Ado Near. I don't have my glasses on. Hey, Sunset. I'm glad to have you here. Hey, Jack. Hey, how are things in Australia? I've been reading a few things that Australia is starting to go low on fuel and that kind of stuff. But how are things in your area there of Australia? 419 in Illinois. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to be right close to $5 a gallon here in about a month. Hey there, Coney. The garden is done. That's awesome. I wish I could even. I can't. I'm hoping maybe this weekend I can work my garden up, and that way I'll be good to go here in about 3-4 weeks, so I can plant my potatoes. Hey there, big boss. How you doing? Yeah, I was just talking about the people that I think that people need to know if there is some kind of collapse. And I think when I say collapse, I'm talking the most common collapse, which is an economic one. In my lifetime, I can remember multiple economic crashes and collapses. I live in Michigan, so there's been multiple recessions, and the car dealer or when the car manufacturers have trouble. The first thing that people don't buy when there's economic problems is a new car. So the car industry is really the first thing that goes, and that's the thing that I've seen here in Michigan. Going all the way back to the stock market crash in 1987. I can remember that quite well, and a lot of the guys that I hung around with, the kids that I hung around with, their parents, dads mostly, lost their jobs. After that. So for me, any sudden or large correction in the stock market, that's kind of the first indicator that, hey, something is going sideways. And then, I lived through it in the early 1990s when I was starting to get into the workforce. You literally had to beg people for a job. And that was kind of how that went. And when I'm talking begging people for a job, you were begging people for a job that was $3.85 an hour. So that's not that far in the past for me, anyway. But Yeah, the economic collapse. So then it helps to know people, and like I said, the shade tree mechanic, HVAC or plumbing people. I'm already fairly decent with carpentry, so that's not quite as important with me. I can patch things up. It might not look pretty, but I can patch things up where they're fairly solid. But like I said, anybody in the medical field, anybody in the veterinary field, and that's one thing around here where we are. Farmers are pretty self-sufficient. They can fix and they can do a lot of things, but there's still some things that are kind of over the top. So, take a look in the last year who you've needed to either help you fix something or help repair something or that kind of stuff over the last year. Those are the people that you need to have. And I don't even say like you don't need to have like a prepping group like, hey, we're all going to be in a compound living together. What I mean when I say a prepping group is you need to have a working relationship with these people so they know you. So if there is a change in the economic situation or the security situation or anything in your area, you still have these folks where you already have a relationship. Hey, I can, make purchases from these people. Maybe we can barter some services back and forth. You kind of see where I'm going with this. And these kind of things have saved me, knowing these types of folks has saved me countless dollars over the years. Another thing is it's good to know, um, like the people in your neighborhood that take care of the electricity stuff like linemen, tree trimmers. It's good to know local law enforcement. Now, I'm not talking about state police or feds or anything like that. I'm talking about your local sheriff deputies. If you live in a village or a small town, your small town police, those are, people that work on the ambulance crew. It's good to know these folks. And a lot of times, if you're just visible in your community. You go to the restaurant to have coffee in the morning, you swing by the fireman breakfast, you swing by any type of these little fundraisers. I've said this many times in my videos too, that if you have um, any small fundraisers in your town, whatever it is, whether it's, a chicken dinner at the Methodist church, it's, it's a fish fry at the American Legion. There's some kind of drawing going on at the VFW. If the firemen are having a chicken cookout or a benefit breakfast, whatever. Those are the things that you need to go to because you're going to meet other members of the community, and that's how you start forming these bonds that can be helpful in these type of situations. All right, I'm going to jump back on here, and I'm getting way behind here. Let's see here. Yes, low on fuel, not favoring the farmers at all. It's all about Sydney. So yeah, it's all the money's going into the large urban areas. That sounds about right. That sounds kind of like Michigan. Us up here in rural Michigan, we just kind of have to get by, and all the money goes down to Detroit, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, that kind of stuff. Tyler, do you do potatoes in bag containers or in mounds? I plant the potatoes in just a regular row. I go about this far apart. I go down about this deep. I will work in a little bit of compost down at the bottom. If I don't have compost, I'll do vegetable fertilizer down in the bottom. I will plant my potato. I like planting my potatoes whole. So I like potatoes that are about this big, that got active sprouts on them. I put them in the ground and I cover them up. Then I don't do anything until they come out of the ground. When they come out of the ground about this much, I will water them really well, especially if there's chances of frost. You want to have the stuff watered really well. And then when they get about this high, the plants, I go through and I do what's called hilling. And what I say by hilling is you're going to hoe up the ground around the stem of the plant. So you're going to have your row is going to look like this from the end. You're going to have a mound of ground that's growing, and that allows the potatoes to grow in the extra ground that you put up. And I typically will hill twice. I will hill once, I'll wait about 2 weeks, and then I will hill again, and then I leave it until I'm ready to harvest. But that's how I do it. And also, if I plant anything in a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket, I will plant it about this deep in that bucket. I'll be about 3/4 of the way down, because as that sprout comes up, then it'll make potatoes off that. You don't want to plant it too shallow in a bucket. And as far as the bags, I have never done the bags with potatoes. Hey there, big boss. How you doing? Coney, new car. Who the blankety blank can afford. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, and I'm in an area where I have to have a pickup truck. And I refuse to buy a pickup truck that's 4-cylinder. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. But I see that's what they're putting in a lot of the full size pickup truck now. They put a turbo in. The first thing that I'm going to tell people about buying any type of vehicle, you want to stay away from anything with a turbo. That's just another part that's going to fail you and break. And the way the new cars are now, if they have a turbo, they have to have that turbo functioning. Turbos are nothing but problems. And you know who I learned that from? My shade tree mechanic that I'm talking to you guys about right now. And I'll tell you about shade tree mechanic. I have in the last week here, I have had the oil changed in all our vehicles, all from the shade tree mechanic, and he charged me like $50 for the first two and $75 for the last one. So I've spent $125 having the oil changed in my two vehicles. I supplied the oil and he supplied the filters, and he actually supplied a couple extra filters, the air filters and stuff in my wife's vehicle. Air filters are kind of important to get optimal gas mileage. So I had the oil here. I purchased the oil when it was $22 for a 5 quart jug of it. Mobile One, full synthetic oil, good for 6,000-7,000 miles. So I'm good now for probably most of the year with the oil changes that we done today. That comes out to right around, well, what I had three, so we're looking at less than $50 a vehicle, and then he supplied the oil, or he supplied the filters. So I paid him a little bit of labor, but that goes a long way with me picking up the phone and saying, hey, you know what, I got this problem going on or that problem, what do you think? And he's helped me out multiple times, pointed me in the direction if it's something that he couldn't fix that I maybe could fix myself, or where to go ahead and have that repaired. So for me, that's kind of an important thing. And he supplied the filters, and I'm sure he got the filters at a discount, sold them to me. He made a little bit of money on that. So everybody kind of did well with this. And if I was going to take those same vehicles in and have a full synthetic oil change, filters changed and stuff at some kind of either dealership or big box store that does that kind of stuff, I probably would have had $75 in each one of those vehicles, with the oil and stuff. So each of our vehicles takes between 5 and 6 quarts of oil. So you kind of do the math on that. I'm looking at more around between $40 and $50, give or take, on those oil changes. And that's why, and then if I need something like a brake job done, I need an alternator replaced, this guy is pretty much available. He's on my phone, and I consider him, in my circle as far as that part goes, if something goes down. So I just wanted to throw that out there and mention that too. Hey there, Seabass, how you doing? Hey there, Gallo. Oh yeah, $4.08 an hour. Yeah, and that's probably when I was making 385. Working in a store. It's crazy what how the price of that wages has went up. Tyler, I think he does his potatoes in the ground and then wraps them with newspaper. Maybe I'm wrong. He has a video on it. I don't wrap the potatoes in newspaper, but what you do with newspaper, I'm going to show you this right here. I got a water bottle right here. Take newspaper, you lay a bottle or a jar or whatever down, and you roll that up, and you're going to get a tube. Then you fold the bottom in, and you slide out the jar or the bottle, whatever you used, and you're going to have a little cylinder that's made out of newspaper. Now you fill that with your potting soil, and you put your seed start in that. Now you let that go until the plant gets high enough where you can put it out in your garden, and you just plant that whole thing in the ground. That newspaper will deteriorate, will go into the ground, and you can use that basically as a biodegradable pot. And we all got, most of us still get some kind of newspaper ads in the mail, and don't use the waxy shiny stuff like in the ads or whatever. Just the regular basic newspaper is what you use. That's what you use for that. And then the other thing I use newspaper for is wrapping up apples, pears, that kind of stuff to overwinter them, and that works really good too. uh Yeah, bartering needs to be a new system. And I think most people, especially people that live out in the country and farmers and stuff, they already kind of got a bartering thing going on. Uh, Coney, first job I had was to check printers for the bank, starting at $1.55 an hour, 17 years old, full time. I was flying through the deep clover. At RVT, as an emergency veterinary technician, I can say that there's a lot of overlap with in the human and medical field. Oh, well, yeah, you know, and I'll throw this out there because it's sort of, it should be common knowledge, but like antibiotics, that goes by weight. Most medications go by weight. I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to get in trouble, but you guys can, look that up for yourself and come up to that kind of conclusions. Hey there, hen house. Hey there, Washburn. Hen house. I got 2 chicks today and getting 2 more tomorrow. All of my raised beds are ready to go, and we'll work on seeing more vegetables this week. Another thing I want to mention about local law enforcement. I have a very good relationship with our village police. I can go down to the cop shop, and that's what they call it. That's what we call our village police station, is we call it the cop shop. I can go down there, knock on the door, go in. The chief's dogs know me. And, I could sit down there and have a cup of coffee as long as there's nothing going on in town or he's got something going on. I could go in there, plop down, have a cup of coffee with the police chief and find out what's going on. That is a source of human intelligence right there. If I need to know, hey, is there this going on, that going on, if a storm's coming in, do we need to worry about this? If there's a power outage, I already have that relationship with him. I have him on my phone. I can text him anytime and say, hey, what's going on? Is it this or that? Should we do this or that? What's the deal on that? Because I've already established that relationship. And I'll tell you what, if you can establish a relationship with your local law enforcement, my mom did the same thing out in the township when I grew up, because where my mom and dad's farm was about 1.5 miles from where I'm sitting right here, and it's in a different township. And my mom always made a point to be on a first name basis with the policeman in our township. And that township typically would only have 1, maybe 2 police at a time. And usually the second one was just part time or if there was something going on. But again, that is the people that you should know in your kind of prepping community and your prepping group. Hey there, Glenn Arthur. How you doing? Snowing and blowing up there where you're at? I believe it. It was about 50 here today, and it's supposed to. They say we're supposed to get this warm snap. That's why I want to do a. I'll try to get that garden worked up, and then that way I'm good to go. And then the leaves and stuff that are in there that kind of overwintered, that can get worked in, break down the soil a little bit more. Hey there, Patrice. Good evening from Northern Illinois. How's things going over there? Dog, can I do a video on water filtration and water filters? What do I have here where I can? I'm not seeing what I'm looking for. Typical. Anyway, water and water filters. I have a Berkey, and I've had a Berkey for years, and I have extra filters for that Berkey. I will clean that Berkey filter with a basically a new Scotch-Brite pad about every 6 months or so. And you didn't have to at the time. You could take a couple of pails and make your own thing, but I actually bought the stainless steel containers that the Berkey things went in. I don't think Berkey's in business anymore because of, something or other. And, I heard people say, the Berkeys weren't tested and all this other stuff. I put clean tap water in my Berkey, and that still takes out. There is like a rust slime that will form on those Berkey filters after a period of time. So I've got a lot of confidence in those Berkey filters on what they filter out of the water. I don't know what the internet rumors are about Berkey, but I have a really, really positive attitude with them that I have seen over the years. And when I say my stored water here, I would filter that before I would use that. That's what I would do. I would dump my stored water here through that Berkey, and then I would go ahead and use it. And it's like a 3-gallon unit. So there's always 3 gallons available of fresh, clean water that's in there. But when I started using that, and I was using clean tap water to put in that. The amount of gunk that it got out of the clean tap water was amazing. And then I have a whole house water filter where the water goes through that as well, and that's a charcoal carbon filter because we're close to the village well here where they inject the chlorine into the water. So we always had a chlorine problem here. So the water goes through that charcoal filter to take the chlorine out first, and then I store it or whatever. But then we take that water and we put it into the Berkey, and it filters out the rest of the stuff. And another reason that I do that is because if something happens to our municipal water, you know, you got the whole boil water advisory. I've already put my water through, you know, a double filtration system basically. And that's set up here, you know, and our village has village generators that can keep the well pumps and stuff going here. So we have a little bit of redundancy here. And then if that all that fails, and I still have to do some kind of water filtration. I have Berkeys, or not Berkeys, I have Sawyer water filters. I have Sawyer squeezes. I have Sawyer minis here that screw right onto the top of the 2-liter bottles that I use for my other water storage. So then I can screw one of those filters on my 2-liter bottle that I washed these bottles and I put clean tap water in all of these bottles, you know, I've got one faucet here that I don't have hooked up to the whole house filter. So if I need, it's actually the laundry sink. And if I want to store water, I take water out of that because that still has the chlorine in it from the village municipal water system. So then that has a little bit of chlorine in that, what I'm storing. So then that, you know, prolongs it too. But then I put a Sawyer mini on there or Sawyer squeeze, and I can filter that at least for any biologicals that maybe, you know, got started in that those 2-liter bottles. Then if that all fails, I've got a large life straw. It's like a large I would say funnel. And what those are for, those were actually, they came out with them, oh gosh, it was probably at least 10 years ago. They had them, and they were for like third world countries and villages when they wanted to, you know, purify water. They didn't have anything. They'd get well water out of these just open wells in the ground, and then they would pour that into these big life straw units. And I say big, they were made for like 5-gallon pails, but they had like a funnel at the top, and then they had the hose system, and they had a large, what looks kind of like what the life straw looks like, with some valves on it, and then a tube that came out the bottom that went into your clean water container. And they were set up, like I said, for kind of villages or neighborhoods. And I have a couple of them here as well. So that's basically my water filtration system. I know that was a little bit of a long chat there, but that's kind of what mine is. So dog, I hope that helps you out there. Hey there, JD Prepping. 87 in Central Texas today. Boy, that's warm. Like I said, I was happy it was just 50 today here. Little Red Hen, how you doing? Michelle, how you doing? Coney, Glenn Arthur, oh no, I am sitting here with a drink in the hand. Oh, well, Glenn is up in the far reaches of Canada. Sometimes I wish I could get up there in the far reaches of Canada. There's a beautiful country up there. Candace, I had a new alternator in one of my vehicles. Do you know those have computers of their own now too? No, that's terrible. AAR American, how are you doing, sir? Washburn Billy, it's a good idea to have a guy who could work on your car. Yeah. And you know, as a general rule, anybody that's mechanically inclined is beneficial. Hey, Prepper for the Ages. Hey there, Jenny Mag. Good to see you. Hey, Coylin, Warrior Poet. How did you start that relationship with your local LEO without coming across as weird or getting labeled? He approached me because I have a YouTube channel, and the rest is history. We actually became pretty good friends over that. And then two, there were different local functions here that we went to together, and we'd see each other at those functions, and we'd strike up conversations and whatnot. And he's a bit of a prepper himself, and we just, you know, how can I say this? People who are into prepping, recognize each other when they start having conversations. And like I said, that is comes from just going to local functions. You know, you start meeting people, you start talking to people. There's people you click with and there's people you don't, and then you know you just kind of weed it down from there. But that's basically how that went in. Glen Arthur, we don't plant most of our garden until Victoria long weekend in May. That is how the old timers planted here in Michigan. The gardens got planted on Memorial Day weekend, what they used to call Decoration Day back in the day. I don't know about bad weather for us. I know we're supposed to get some rain, but I don't think it's going to be anything more than rain. Hen house, I have a Lexapro stainless steel. Need to get a few more filters for it for the tap water. Like I said, I don't know how long them filters last, but I've been cleaning ours and I'm still using the original filters, and we've had that filter up and going probably 6 years already. John, reminder for the community watch: stop watching the oil prices, start watching the factories that uses the different type of oil. Plastic factories, they're starting to ration or go idle. Well, we're a farming community here, and our this is sort of the off season now for the farming. They're getting ready to start planting and stuff, but all the processing and all the co-ops and all that other stuff, that's kind of on the downswing right now. So I won't know anything like that in my local area till probably about August. Hey, Jody from Michigan. Old grouchy guy, how you doing? Warrior Poet, even your best water filtration system is prone to mold and bacteria, needs to be cleaned and sanitized from time to time. Yeah, and that's the same with my home house filter. I'll tell you how I do that. It's a screw-on deal. I unscrew it, I take it down. It's a large, it's not glass, but it looks like glass. It's a large plastic container. I'll take the old filter out. Then I will take a little bit of bleach, a couple caps full. I'll put that down in the bottom and I'll swirl that around because that's where it collects all the sediment. I'll dump that out. I'll rinse the whole thing out. I'll put another cap full of bleach in it, rinse it out again. And then when I open my filter, I touch it just by the very top and I set that down in. And then I'll take just a little bit of olive oil and put it on. There's a big rubber O-ring on the top of that. I'll take a little bit of olive oil, rub it on that O-ring so it can start into the inside part, and then I screw that back up in, and then it's good. And those filters are good for something like, I don't know, 100,000 gallons of water or something like that. And because it goes through, it goes basically to our kitchen and then our bathroom. And then our laundry sink, I hook that up. So when I put that stuff in, the laundry sink is actually before that filter. So if I need chlorinated water, I go to that particular sink, and then the rest of the house gets filtered. Warrior Poet, gas in California is 6 for 87. It'll be 6 here yet, I'm afraid, by the end of summer. Yeah, new cars are definitely a pain, and I just, we paid like $48,000 for our house, and now a pickup truck with a V8 is like $65,000. It's ridiculous. Hey Zeke, glad to have you here. Yeah. Tyler, take care. No problem. You have a good one. But dog, I hope that kind of answers your question there on how I go about doing that as far as our water filtration. And if I have to go get water out of the local hand pumps and stuff that are around here, I probably will still run it through either that Berkey or one of store the water up and then run it through a Sawyer before I'm ready to use it. Tyler, question before I go: what's your favorite meal at home using preps or something in the top 5? I just did a video on that. It's probably my next video that's going to come out. It's fried rice, and the fried rice we make with just everything that's in our prepper pantry. So yeah, check out the next video, Tyler, that I have coming out, because it'll probably be out here in a day or two. Candace, got a Kelly Kettle base camp model. I haven't tried it. Any suggestions, tips, or tricks? I got I don't know where I got my Kelly Kettle right now. I think I got out in the other room. I got an expansion plug to put in the end, because the end stopper that comes with it, that's just a whistle when it's done. I got an expansion plug. So when I put water in my Kelly kettle and I take it to like my camping spot or whatever, the water doesn't leak out. I can actually use that then as a water container. Then I take that expansion plug out, so I could put the Whistler plug in there for when we're cooking, and they work pretty darn good. What I do is I'll put some tinder down in the very bottom of it and get that bowl lit, and then I will set the Kelly kettle on top of it then, and then I will put my little small twigs or small pieces of kindling in there, and it works good. I should have got the bigger model. I got kind of like the smaller, like the medium sized model, but I wish I really would have got the bigger one that was more for a family. But that expansion plug, you can't, of course, you can't leave that in when it's, when you're using it. That's just for transport. But I'll tell you what, that little expansion plug is really nice because, and I've heard now that Kelly Kettle actually has their own, but I just went up to the hardware store, got an expansion plug, and used that for transportation only. But like I said, when you want to use it, you got to take that out. L-Dog, oh yes, you answered everything I had a question about. Good, I'm glad that helped you out there. But like I said, that's just how I do it. I was told that you can do a red dye. This is Living Call, Minnesota. You could do a red dye test to your filter, put a drop of red food coloring in and see if it filters it out. I've heard about that too. I should maybe try that sometime. And then too, I've got actually some canned water here. I've canned water in the past as well. And one water that I like to can is actually rainwater. If I know there's a big rainstorm coming, like in late spring, early summer, I'll take a big stainless steel pan outside and I'll go set it on one of my tables outside, and I'll just let rainwater go into that. Then I'll take that rainwater and I will filter that with a coffee filter into a quart can. I'll put a lid on it and I'll do a 10-minute hot water bath on it, and I will label that as rainwater, and I'll put that up. And that's the water I use for soap making, because there isn't a better water on the face of the earth for soap making than there is rainwater, because rainwater has nothing in it. It's basically naturally soft water with nothing in it. And when my mom and my grandma, they would make soap, it would always be rainwater that they would use for that. Because if you get like well water or municipal water, whatever, well water in particular, because that's hard water, there's other minerals and stuff that are in that naturally, and that doesn't react well with the lye and the stuff that you have to put in to make the soap. So when you're soap making, it's always best if you can use natural rainwater. And then of course, rainwater is free. It's not like we have to pay for it. I'm sure there's some places where they want to charge you for rainwater, but right now it still is free. But yeah, that's my tips and tricks there on the Kelly kettle. You have a good night, Gallo. Glad to have you here. Washburn Billy, I made some fried rice for the first time a couple weeks ago with some canned salmon. It was pretty darn good. And that's the thing with fried rice. We do it with chicken here, but you can do it like Washburn did with salmon. You can do it with Spam. You can do it with leftover ham. You can just do it with a lot of different. You can do it with sausage. I've never made it with sausage, but I'm sure that you could make it with sausage as well. Fried rice is just one of those things that is, it's just really simple. It's rice, it's meat, it's some vegetables, it's a seasoning mix, and those seasoning mixes you can make yourself, and it's soy sauce. And soy sauce is one of those things. I keep a lot of soy sauce here because it's a flavoring, it's salt, it keeps forever. You can use it to cure meat. Like there's been times when we've made jerky with just brown sugar and soy sauce. You mix brown sugar and soy sauce, take your strips of venison or beef, put it in there, soak it for a day or two, take it out of there, let it dry off, and then smoke it. And you got basically a pretty darn good jerky. It's not as good as some of the mixes that you can buy, but you got a pretty darn good jerky for, really a minimal amount of ingredients. Hey there, Trish. How you doing? Oh yeah, home canned salmon. I'll tell you a story there, Washburn, about canned salmon. My in-laws, they would go up to the St. Mary's River. Now, the St. Mary's River, for those of you that don't know, is what connects Lake Superior to Lake Huron. And Lake Superior, that's where the Soo Locks are in the Sault Ste. Marie, because Lake Superior is actually higher than what Lake Huron is. So when all the lake freighters come from Duluth, Superior, Wisconsin, Marquette, whatever, they go to Sault Ste. Marie. They go through Whitefish Bay, they go into Sault Ste. Marie, they go through the Soo Locks, and then the St. Mary's River takes them down to Lake Huron, takes you past Mackinac Island. So that's, and then Sault Ste. Marie on the Michigan side is only about a 25% the size of Sault Ste. Marie on the Ontario side. Sault Ste. Marie on the Ontario side of the border is huge. Anyway, the ships come through there. That's how they go through the St. Mary's River. The St. Mary's River is known for pink salmon, and the pink salmon only run like every other year, every third year, something like that. And my in-laws took me up there pink salmon fishing, so I have fished pink salmon already. But when they would go up there, and when my wife was younger and stuff, they would have basically two crews. They would have a fishing crew and they'd have a canning crew. They would get a hotel that had a kitchen in it. They would take the pressure canners and the jars and stuff up there with them. They would catch the salmon. They would clean them. They had fish cleaning stations up there. They clean the fish, take the cleaned fish back to the hotel with the kitchen. They would pack all that in jars and they would pressure can it. And when they were done, they would take all the canned salmon home, and then that was their canned salmon that they had for the year. So they would can all that when they were up there. And then when, the canning crew got tired of canning, they would switch, and then they would go fishing and the fishing crew would can, and they'd go up there for like a week, and they would come home with, whatever, 100 quarts of, or pints of salmon, whatever they would catch that year. But my wife's dad would go up there, and then his cousin and their families, they would all go up there and do that. And although I wasn't part of that, those times had kind of been over with by the time that me and my wife got together. But I loved hearing those stories about how those guys did that. Warrior Poet, insane in some of the state's jurisdictions, you're not allowed to catch rainwater. Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. But then again, that's just like hunting licenses. The state charging you for stuff that occurs naturally. It occurs naturally, but of course it belongs to the state. It's kind of like, having a CPL to carry your sidearm. Here in Michigan, you got to have a CPL, and it's basically the best way to carry here in Michigan is to get a CPL, but you're basically buying your rights back from the government. That's just how it is. If they would have a way, like I said, I remember seeing a banker or something on TV a while back, whatever, where he was talking about that people should have to pay for water, and they should have to pay for the air that they breathe. I'm like, oh yeah, well, who owns the air? Who owns the water that falls from the sky? Apparently the government does. Just shit like that. I get tired of hearing stuff like that. Some of those rich guys, I'd like to take them out and make them hunt for their own food once. It'd be good for them. They'd learn something. That sometimes you have to depend on yourself, and those guys think that they can just get away. Anyway, I'll shut up now. The right water means a lot. That's why Kentucky bourbon is the best, filtered through limestone. Oh yeah, limestone spring water is good stuff. Hen house. I am stocking up on canned goods since things like veggies and tuna are on sale. It lasts forever. I'm just not a big tuna eater, but I know a lot of people that do like it, and it's good for you. But if I have a tuna fish sandwich, a tuna fish salad sandwich, like once a year, maybe twice a year, I'm kind of maxed out my tuna. I maxed out my tuna taste for the year. Canned meat and veggies are a better investment than most stocks in crypto. I agree with you, Warrior Poet. So did my grandmother. My grandma always said the best investment you can have is a full pantry. I can still remember her saying that. And I remember the first time she said that, we were, mom and grandma and me, I was just a little kid. I don't know, maybe 6 years old. We went over to the neighbor's house, and the neighbors there, it was a lady and her daughter, and they lived at this house. Her husband had died several years before. They still had the land, but another farmer farmed it. But they had chickens, they had a hand pump. They did not have running water in the house. They had a hand pump and they had an outhouse. And as long as I can remember, that was like that. And finally, then when those ladies passed away and that house changed hands, then they finally did put running water in there. But that place was one of the old school places that were there, and I still remember going over there, and they had one of those real long pantries. A lot of them old farmhouses, they had a pantry that was about half as wide as the house, but it was only about, this wide, because the cupboards that were built in there was just enough so you could walk through, and there were cupboards on both sides, and they had all their canned stuff in there and everything. And that's where Grandma first told me that. She said that that's the best investment anybody can make, is a full pantry. JD Prepping, I got a deal on chicken breasts for $179 for 40 pounds. That's not a bad price in this day and age anymore. We're going to can them up this weekend. Awesome. Yeah, if you guys caught my hiding food video that I did there, that all those cans of chicken and stuff that were stacked up there, that was right around 99 to $1.29 for large quantities, like 20-pound bags of that, when I canned that, because some of that chicken is going on 3 years old that I canned there before the prices skyrocketed on everything. And every time I open one of those cans and I use it, I think about how much money that I saved, compared to what the price of canned chicken is now. Now, sometimes I will still buy commercial canned chicken, because sometimes I don't have the recipes that I have doesn't take for a whole quart. Now, if I'm making a large meal for everybody, then I use the quart. But if it's something smaller, I will typically maybe use the small commercial ones. And the next time that I can chicken, I'm going to can some in pints. So then I don't have to rely on that canned store-bought chicken anymore for that. But that's something that I'm probably going to do come late summer, early fall. Fall is starting to can some chicken in some smaller containers. Warrior Poet, trying to convince the normies that I've lost a lot of frying friends, trying to realize that pantry is more important than the latest video game. Well, unfortunately, they'll find out. But hopefully it's not a situation bad enough where they suffer too bad and they realize that they should put up a little bit. It's a little bit, not having food will change a lot of people's opinion, or have to pay a ridiculously high price for it. I just got 12 drumsticks for five the other day, froze 10 of them. We used to get the 10-pound bags of the chicken leg quarters for like $4. And that's all by the wayside now. It's double some of that stuff. I still got some chicken leg quarter bags in the freezer that I paid only like $5 or $6 for. And I think the last time I seen a bag of that, they were like $8.97 or something like that. Yep, save all the scraps for the chicken and freeze it for stock and broth. Oh yeah, if you got a turkey too, if you cook a turkey, save the bones and make turkey soup. Washbourne fish recipes. Oh yeah, I have a yeah, well, with canned salmon, you can make salmon patties. You can make salmon salad. There's a bunch of different things you can make of that. The salmon patties is what the in-laws would use with that salmon that they got out of the St. Mary's River. They would make salmon patties. They would like bread salmon. They would take the salmon, put an egg in it, put the seasoning in it and stuff, and then they would pad that in some in an egg wash, and then some breadcrumbs, and they would fry that so it had a little bit of a coating on it. And those, I'm not a big salmon guy either, but those were good. I like canned whitefish. That's actually pretty decent. Warrior 2 on hiding food or preps, great video. Attic hotter powder foods, everything else in the cooler, lowest level. Yeah, I like putting my container like that right on the basement floor. Cold air sinks, the the cement floor gets cool, then it radiates that coolness back into it. And I have got stuff in that container that I showed there in that video that's past the expiration date, like a couple of years, and that stuff's fine. We open some of that stuff and use some of that stuff out of there. It's like you just bought it yesterday, because the storage conditions are so good. Coney B, I use pints for most of my meat, just hubby and myself. Yeah, we're getting to be older now. We don't have the large family over here day in and day out, so it's a little better for us. Old grouchy guy, still have 5 full chickens in the freezer from last fall's flock harvest. Still have 30 walking around. Mom, she would butcher, if I remember right, she would typically butcher between 30 and 40 chickens, and then she would split them in half, and she would freeze those in halves. And then that is the chicken that we would have that wasn't canned. That was the chicken that she put in the freezer, and she would have them stacked right up. And that was the chicken that we had for the winter than if we wanted a roast chicken or a fried chicken or something like that. And then typically, if we had a roast chicken, then whatever the leftovers and the bones were, mom would simmer that for broth, and then we would have broth. And mom's the two things mom would always put in the chicken, well, actually three things she would put in that when she would make chicken broth. She would put an onion in it, she would put a couple of whole allspice in it, and she would put a bay leaf in it. And those couple whole allspice in that pot of chicken broth, chicken stock, changes the flavor dramatically to the positive. That is some good stuff right there. That was one of mom's tips that she always did with chicken broth. Washbourne salmon chowder is the best. Just always make too much. That actually sounds too. I like fish chowder. I've had a couple different kinds of fish chowder, and I like clam chowder. I've made clam chowder here too. That's another thing that I have in our pantry down here. I have a few cans of canned clams. So if I do want to make, and that's all I ever use canned clams for is when I make clam chowder. But I typically will keep about 4 or 5 cans of canned um, clams here too, and then a bottle of the clam juice, because you usually use a little bit of that when you're making the clam chowder too. But with my homemade potatoes and homemade potatoes, homegrown potatoes, and home grown onions from the garden, that makes some pretty darn good clam chowder. Warrior Poet, LOL. You can cook all kinds of salmon, salmon gumbo, salmon stew, Forrest Gump. Dana, hi everybody. Learned so much from this channel. How about you guys? I appreciate that, Dana. I just share what I think people can use, kind of like talking about, the right people to know if there is some type of collapse. I look at a prepping community different, I guess, than like a militia, and of course, I live in a rural farming community. I don't have to worry about my neighbors not having, self-protection items. With everybody around here has that. It's just, ingrained into the people around here, so I don't necessarily have to have a bunch of infantry types. I need people that can, fix things, repair things, because as a community, there's been different times where there's things that have taken place here in our town where our town kind of coalesces around that, or at least, core members of the community will coalesce. They'll condense down to, help each other out, which I think is fairly common in a lot of like natural scenarios, snowstorms, tornadoes, thunderstorms, hurricanes down south and stuff. The local communities, the people in the local communities kind of help their neighbors and stuff. And I know when we had some riffraff come in here in 2011 because we had a bad storm come through here, and there were several places here that were out of power for over a week and stuff. And that first day after those storms, there was a lot of outsiders that came in here, and the local police department, they got right on it and they called the state police. And then there was like state police for the next about 4 days. There were state police that patrolled our town because of all those people that were coming in. I think people were coming in here to think that they were going to start looting and stuff, and that did not fly at all. Like I said, when the local police, they got on the horn and they called for backup and stuff, we had a very strong police presence in our community for at least about 4 days, I would say, after that, until all these riffraff from other places basically got out of here. But there was definitely a swift reaction to that particular situation. Candace, I can mostly in pints, even tomatoes. Other than that, fruit and jelly jars. No, I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've never seen a Bigfoot. I know they talk about the dog man up north either too, but I've never seen that. I need to master a sourdough starter hen house. I have made sourdough starters a couple of times. Grape plants have natural yeast on them, either wild grapes or tame grapes. I have a grape um, plant in my backyard. And what I did is I made my starter with my flour and my water, and I put a piece of gauze over the top of that jar, put a rubber band on it, and then I took that jar out and I put it underneath those grapes. And then every day I'd put a little more water, not municipal water. It's got to be bottled water because you can't have any chlorine or anything in it because it'll kill your yeast that you're trying to harvest. but I put a little bit of bottled water or water I ran through the filter. I put a little bit of that in there and a little bit more flour every day, and I just let that sit out there. And I actually did get a starter out of that. I made a couple different loaves of bread and stuff out of that starter, whether it's like a San Francisco sourdough starter. I don't think it was quite that good, but it was a sourdough starter. And I did that basically by utilizing the natural yeast. And I had somebody tell me that, or I read that somewhere, that natural yeast accumulates on grapes and grape leaves. So that's why I went ahead and I did that. Do I dehydrate vegetables, Jack? Yes, I do. And I've got several videos on that. I want to say I have videos on dehydrating bell peppers. I know I've got a video on dehydrating peas and carrots. And you don't have to necessarily have stuff from your garden to dehydrate. Like when I do peas and carrots, I'll go, and when I can get like a pound bag of peas and carrots for like 79 cents, I'll buy a bunch of them and I'll put them in my dehydrator. I'll dehydrate those down. And then when I want to use them, I'll just take them out and put them in my soup or my stew, or like when I make the fried rice, I'll put warm water on them, soak them for about 20 minutes, half an hour, so they reconstitute, and then I'll add them to whatever that I'm making. But the big two things that I dehydrate out of my garden are bell peppers, hot peppers, and onions. But if you dehydrate onions, you got to do that outside. You got to do that in an outbuilding or something, because you will literally stink up the house for about 12 hours until those fumes get off those onions. So if you slice onions and you want to dehydrate them, you want to do that in an outbuilding. But yes, I have videos on dehydrating. I'm sure I have a playlist on that. So if you check my playlists, look through that. I'm pretty sure that I have a dehydrating playlist. Trish, I forgot to chat because I'm busy listing. Oh, no problem. It's all good. Some call it worrying, warrior poet. Some call it worrying. I call planning ahead. The old timers always did. They were always putting up food and stuff. And when times looked bad, they put up more food. If they thought something was going to go down or whatnot, they would can more. They would put up more firewood. They wouldn't kind of sit and worry and complain about it. They would be very proactive about it. If they thought something was, going to go down in the fall, they plant an extra couple rows of potatoes. That's how things were. And the same thing with like firewood. If they thought it was going to be a particularly cold winter, or there were storms coming or anything like that, they'd cut more firewood. So it was just like, when a squirrel puts away more food because the winter's going to be colder and has a thicker, bushier coat, that's just the natural reaction to that stuff. I wonder if you could pop vegetables like corn. That I do not know. Never tried it. Think you can pop amaranth. Not positive. Yeah, I've heard good things about amaranth, but I've never tried planting it. Wife, mommy, I want to move out of California soon. We are looking to leave next year, but leaving behind a huge garden and a ranch. Yeah, that would be hard to leave something like that. I can understand. Got to find property. Well, if you're looking for property, if I was looking for property, I'd want a little bit of a hill, and I would want that hill. If I'd have to put a house on that, I would want the hill north of where I put the house. So the hill would block the north wind and the house would face south, so it would pick up the warm. But I'm a cold weather guy, so I always prepare for cold weather. And then if you can get a little bit of water on that property, that's even better, whether it be a well or whether it be a little bit of a stream or a spring or anything like that. That'd be the other thing that I would want. And if one of the things the old timers would always look for property around here, they would look at the trees that were growing on the property. If they had a lot of evergreens, or they would have a lot of like Scotch pine or jack pine, or they would have paper bark birch growing on the property, they would say that's thin soil. And what that meant was the soil wasn't very good for growing anything, and it wasn't very good for farming. If they were looking at a piece of land, they wanted hardwoods like maples and ash and oak and stuff on that, because that was better ground. If the ground was too crappy, those trees would not grow there. And I did a video on just a little while back on what my grandmother told me about, being self-sufficient, what kind of property and land, how much land you needed to be self-sufficient. So check that video out. I go into a little bit more detail on that, where things that my grandmother told me about, what you needed to have for self-sufficiency. uh, oh yeah, don't plan for today, plan for next month or the next season, definitely. I appreciate that, Washburn. Like I said, I just try to help people out with what I know. Hen house, I've looked into dry wells too, have our underground tank for water conservation. Cisterns were big around here. A lot of the farmhouse basements would have cisterns where they would collect water in there. That was a really popular thing. And that way they would always have they always have a little bit of backup stored water. And the old timers around here, like if there was a storm or something coming, the first thing they did is they would store water. Yeah, pines like acidic soil. Yeah, the pine needles. The only good thing about the pines and the acidic soil is that's where you find your wild blueberries or your huckleberries, because they like acidic soil, usually wet acidic soil. And there's two types of huckleberries. There's low bush and there's high bush. Now, if you got drier ground, like more of a sandy ground, where you got a lot of pines in there, that's where you'll typically find the low bush ones. And if you got a little bit wetter, where it's a little bit swampier, that's where you find the high bush blueberries. We've picked quite a few wild blueberries around here, but you got to know where to go. There's one place in particular on a state park where they have a lot of low bush, and then there's some state land that's not too far from here where there's a lot of the high bush wild blueberries. And I'll tell you what, nothing tastes better than wild blueberries. You can go pick blueberries at the blueberry farm, and that's okay too, but there's nothing like wild blueberries. What state am I located in? I'm in Michigan. I'm in northern Michigan, basically. And when I say northern Michigan, I-69 divides the lower peninsula in half, and that's pretty much the dividing line. The really urban areas of Michigan are south of I-69, and then you start getting north of I-69. You go through the agricultural areas, then you get up into the woods in the northern lower, and then pretty much the whole upper peninsula is woods. But the Upper Peninsula is known for their really nasty winters, and this year they really got slammed. The last winter storm that they got, most places in the Upper Peninsula got at least 3 feet of snow, and that is some of the worst weather that I have ever seen up there in the Upper Peninsula. So if you're planning on living anywhere north of I-69, you should be prepared for a certain amount of winter. What do raspberries prefer? Raspberries prefer the raspberries that grow wild around here, and I've actually dug some of the wild ones up, put them in my backyard. They kind of like a sandy loam, and the wild raspberries around here are actually black raspberries, and they're not blackberries, they're black raspberries. They call them black cap raspberries, and those guys are actually really good for making wine and making jam. And I've made a lot of both with those black raspberries. And then sometimes you can find the red raspberries. Red raspberries and thimbleberries are more up in the Upper Peninsula. You can find those up there, but around here for us, it's the black raspberries. Coney, hen house. Did not know about coffee grounds and lemon trees. I have both. Coffee grounds are great fertilizer. Coffee grounds are something that I save and I put in my compost tumbler. Trish, I have wild blueberries on our property, but the bears always get them first. I remember the first time I ever seen a bear in the woods, and it was up north, and we were driving down this back road, and of course we had the kids with us and stuff. They were a lot younger then, and there was a couple old farmsteads that had went wild basically, and a couple of them had old orchards in there that went wild, and it was in the later summer, early fall, and it was still kind of warm outside. And I seen a black bear probably about 100 yards away. He stood up on his hind legs and he was pulling the apples down off of the apple tree so he could could go down and eat them. We stopped there and we watched them with binoculars for probably about a half an hour. It's probably one of the neatest things I ever seen, and that was the first time I had ever seen a black bear in the wild. It, used to pick asparagus by the roadside in Hillsdale, Michigan in the early, yeah, if there's like was like an old farm or something, they would have that. They would have, and not just that, but daffodils and tulips for your wife or girlfriend too, if you'll see them growing down in the old ditches where there used to be farms. But yeah, there's some people around here that will pick asparagus in ditches like that where there are old farms, but that's like a tightly held secret. I'm not a big asparagus eater, so I don't really care for asparagus. My wife does, but I'd pass on the asparagus myself. But yeah, there are places where they still do that. Pentucky didn't get this for 54 minutes, says here, just for a couple. Dandelion wine. Oh yeah, dandelion wine. That was another thing that that the old timers made, and a couple of the things that they would put into dandelion wine. They would typically slice up a lemon, they would slice up an orange, and they would put a box of white raisins into the dandelion wine. They would mix that all together, and that's what they would ferment to make the dandelion wine. Good stuff. Washburn. I remember seeing my first moose when I was fishing in Wawa. Yeah, now I've seen moose up in the Upper Peninsula. I actually got I believe I actually have a short of a moose on the side of the road that I took a couple of years ago when we were up there, and then I have some pictures of a moose with a calf. That's probably about 10 years old, those pictures. But I got a short on a moose standing on the side of the road, and that was actually by Covington in the Upper Peninsula. So if you guys want to look, you can look on the UP map where Covington is. Well, guys, I've been on here about an hour. I don't want to take your entire night up. I had a good time on this chat here with you guys talking about stuff, but I wanted to talk about the kind of the important people that you kind of should know that would make your life easier if there is some type of economic collapse or something. And I wanted to, having them oil changes and stuff here in the last week, I wanted to bring that up, having, some people to know to fix and repair things and to get information from. That kind of stuff can be infinitely valuable in a bad situation. But anyway, guys, this is Modern Refugee. Appreciate all my subscribers out there. Appreciate all you guys being on these live streams with me. I enjoy sharing all the information back and forth with you guys. But anyway, appreciate you guys. You guys take care and be safe out there.